I would like to take this opportunity to to introduce myself quickly. I'm Fadi Azhari with StarRock, and I'm the host and moderator for today's session. I'm delighted to be joined by two of the best thought leaders in the data analytics and AI space today. Dr. Prashanth Southekal, founder of the DPP Institute, and Michael Taylor, AI Chief Data Scientist at Siemens. In today's session, we will cover the many facets of this great topic to try to understand what real-time analytics really mean. Some of the questions that might be on your mind are, do I need it? What are the key challenges in adopting it? And how it can benefit what I do for my business. And with that, I would like to turn it over to just a quick introduction by Prashanth and Mike, and then I'll look back to me to do a quick intro of StarRock, and we can get started on the discussion. Prashanth, would you like to do an intro of yourself?
Oh, thanks, Fadi, and thanks everybody for joining this webinar. My name is Prashanth Southekal. I am a consultant, author, and a professor. Basically, as a consultant, I help companies transform data into a measurable and monetizable business asset. For people in the call, is it possible to turn your microphone off? I hear some background noise as well. Or else, Tyler, can you mute everybody? Except me and Mike. Okay, so as a consultant, I've consulted for over 80 different organizations, including some big names such as P&G, GE, Apple, and Shell. But at the same time, very small companies as well. But the problem has been the same. How do we get value out of data and analytics? And most of the time, what I've seen is the biggest enabler for change or getting value out of data and analytics is mainly education. And that's where I do my second hat, which is as an educator or an author and a professor. I've written quite a few blogs on data and analytics in Forbes and other places. And I'm also a professor of data and analytics at IE Business School in Madrid, Spain. So that's what I do: consultant, author, and a professor.
Great. Well, thanks for the intro, Prashanth. Mike, would you like to do this?
Yes. Thank you so much, again, Fadi and StarRock, for the invitation, and warm welcome to the audience. I'm Michael Taylor. I am the AI Chief Data Scientist at the RealTime Analytics Center. I'm in Singapore. My task is, or my passion really is the same as Prashanth, is to help our customers, make a sense out of the huge amount of data that they are collecting. Especially in my industry, this transportation. Siemens, we make trains, we sell that to operators, to maintainers, and asset owners. And so my goal is to figure out how we use this data to support the operators in making decisions, the asset owners, in terms of, for example, when to make renewal decisions, how to assign different trains for different operational tasks, for example. But prior to my time at Siemens, I've worked for many other types of companies, like media companies and e-commerce. My last company before Siemens was eBay. So yeah, this is me, and I like talking about data analytics. I also write a lot on LinkedIn, share my ideas and try to also learn from different people.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for the introduction, Mike. So before we get started with our conversation today, just a little bit about StarRock's, our point of view on real-time analytics, and then we can really dive into the bulk of our content and some of the topics that I'm sure that it's on your mind. So from our perspective, our point of view at StarRock is, and why we started the company, is that enterprises really need to grow by adding new value-added services very quickly, and as they drive their digital transformation, but they need to get instant and new insights very quickly from really constantly changing data, right? Not just data that comes in historically, but they're constantly changing data, and they want to act on that changing data instantly. And in addition to that, there's also now with the connected enterprise for digital transformation, user-facing analytics and operational analytics are becoming one pool. and that increases the number of users that are needed to or wanting to access the data. And increasingly, this real-time data is also combined with historical data. So if you think of all these challenges, that's what really got us to try to look at what we do to solve that problem. Next slide, please. So just quick highlight overview. I won't go through the details. StarRock started a couple of years ago, and we already have massive adoption across a large set of swath of enterprises that are driving at the forefront of their transformation. You can see some of their logos here, including Airbnb here in the US and some others. And really, there are 4 things we're trying to solve head on to those challenges that were talked about in the prior slide. Really, how do we deliver blazing fast queries, right? We're talking about seconds, not minutes. How do we support massive amount of concurrent users, not just hundreds, but thousands and tens of thousands? And how do we actually provide that real-time insight on changing data in very fast way, not on just existing data that you need time to actually ingest that new data, but really want to make that insight instant. And then finally, how do you do it at very cost effectively in a really clean and effective way? So those are the 4 tenets, so to speak, of what drives StarRock. And with that, I think we want to go back now and really dive into the topic, explaining real-time analytics. And with that, I'd like to just kind of jump in to some of the questions I want to pose to our guests here, Prashanth and Mike. So the first one is to you, Prashanth. We hear the term real-time analytics very often, but what does it really mean?
Yeah. It's a great question, Mike. Let's start with the fundamentals. So before I go to real-time analytics, I just want to give a little bit of a context on my answer, on my response on real-time analytics by looking at what data analytics is all about. So fundamentally, data analytics is basically asking questions to gain insights using data for decision making. So I tell my clients, if you don't have questions, there's no point in looking at data and analytics. There's no point in talking about whether we need Python or whether we need Power BI or all those things. They are important, but they come later. You need to have the right questions for which you are seeking insights for. That's why that's the definition of data analytics. Now, the second thing is why? Why does it matter? Why do businesses need data analytics? So we have seen a lot of research about the purpose of data analytics and what are the factors that will help succeed the data analytics program. And the number one reason in almost all the research which we have is data culture. So again, you might ask, what is this data culture? How does it help in data analytics program? So the fundamentally data culture in the world of data analytics is all about measurement for performance improvement. So if you don't believe in improving performance with measurement, then your data and analytics programs will not go very, very far. So that's the background in which I want to bring all the audience to a common page about why data analytics and what is data analytics. It's not about R and Python. They all come later. They are important, but they come later. The first thing which you need is about the culture, the definition, questions, and all those things, the building blocks that are required before you embark on data analytics, including real-time analytics. Now, now to your question about real-time analytics. So given that data is a recording of the past event, people might ask, hey, does real-time analytics really exist? So what is this real-time analytics? Given that data in whichever industry, whether it's oil and gas or retail or CPG, it's always a recording of the past event. So is it truly real-time? So when we talk about real time, what we are talking about is insights that are derived with minimal delay from the canonical system which we have. So that's what we are talking about real-time analytics, where there is very minimal delay. The better word would be kind of near real-time. But overall, when we talk about minimal delay, when we have it in the world of data analytics, that's where real-time analytics comes into the picture. So broadly, this type of analytics can be of two major types, which I've written in my blog as well. One is the on-demand analytics. Okay, I have this data in my data warehouse. Can I derive insights quickly so that I don't have to wait for hours and months for this data to come to my canonical system? So that's the first part of it, which is on-time or on-demand real-time analytics. Next, the second one is about continuous real-time analytics with alerts, triggers, and so on, which Mike can talk in the world of Siemens and Rail Analytics, where the events happen based on predefined business rules. So that you are getting this kind of notification as and when these particular events are happening based on rules and thresholds and control limits which you have set up. So overall, the definition of real-time analytics is basically minimal delay to run to get your insights. Fadi, you are muted, Fadi.
This is a very helpful definition. Thank you, Prashanth. So with that, I want to turn it over to Mike. And from your perspective, Mike, what is the impact of really real-time analytics and the business benefits, right, in improving that business performance? So Prashanth certainly talked about what it is, the definition. So, and why does it really matter? We'd love to get your perspective.
Yeah, I think it's thank you, Fadi. That's a great question. And I like the things that Prashanth said. Maybe starting off with what analytics really is, and then connecting the analytics to the business value in that sense, because you have to start with the business question. You have to understand from the business perspective what are your pain points, the things that bothers you, the things that you want to solve, and then from there you can then decide on what are the insights that you require to be able to make those decisions. Acting upon those decisions is really what creates the outcome and subsequently the value in that sense. So every business is definitely wants to create values, and it wants to have an outcome. And that's based on certain decisions that you make. So if this is the priority of businesses, to create outcome or to create value, whether for themselves or their stakeholders, and creating value is dependent upon the decisions that you make, then it is highly important on how quickly, as we just said, how quickly you have make those decisions, how relevant those decisions are, how timely those decisions are in that sense. So the implication or the business impact of maybe not having the real-time analytics capabilities that enables you to have quickly insights that is relevant. So as Prashanth also highlighted, is that it might lead to kind of a delayed decision, which is practically a bad decision. I know this is a quote from your blog, which I like a lot, but delayed decision is practically a bad decision in that sense. So so this is perhaps what I will see as the major impact that it will have, because if you have the delayed decision, of course, then you miss opportunities. So depending on the industry, which you mentioned about, why that matters a lot, because it will enable you to make decisions at speed within your business, for example. It will enable you to quickly detect and address operational issues. Person mentioned perhaps my world, where we are dealing, we have trains, we have operators that needs to make decisions in real time. You want to understand whether your train is delayed or not in that sense. And it's coming on time. You want to know whether the train that I'm assigning for today is not going to have any operational issues or not going to have any breakdown, for example. So this kind of real-time information on certain telematics information on the train will give the operators some very instant information as to what is really happening, whether there is any potential for failure. Because if the train breaks down on the track, to withdraw the train out of that and take that to the depot, for example, it's huge effort and it's very, very costly. So you may want to prevent this type of things. So, real-time information will help us to quickly detect and address this type of issues. So in a nutshell, I will say, real-time analytics will enable businesses to react without delay, to quickly detect and respond to patterns in user behavior, for example, to take advantage of opportunities that could otherwise be missed, depending on the industry that you're working on, and to prevent problems before they arise.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I mean, the variety of use cases are obviously huge. Would love to maybe you can dive into a couple of interesting use cases more specific. I know you mentioned the train as a general category, but can you suggest a couple of use cases for real-time analytics that you came across that could be good to help illustrate the point for our audience today and kind of walk them through that? That'd be great.
Yeah, I think there are, because in my experience, and as I said, before I worked for analysts in different industries. Preferably, one of them is like financial service. I used to work for Visa, and of course, one of the core things that as an institution that they try to mitigate is fraud. Isn't it? So monitoring, people transactional behavior in real time can enable them to detect fraudulent transactions, for example. So this is where real time info, an interesting story, to be honest, happened like yesterday. I was talking to a friend of mine from the US, and he was complaining about his wife account that was compromised. And fraudsters got hold of the account, and they made 20 transactions before even the bank was able to alert them. So for me, that was like, wow, again, like too much. Why would you allow 20 mischievous transactions to happen before you even stop that? So and I don't know the name of the bank, but I will assume, like, for me, that is like a no-go in that sense. So real-time information at least could have prevented those type of things from happening. If you understand your customer behavior, you understand the transactional behavior patterns. If there's anything suspicious, I think that is out of sync to their behavior, these are things that should have been flagged very quickly. So before somebody makes 20 transactions, before you stop that could have been stopped. So in other words, like those kind of detecting fraudulent transactions in banks, perhaps it's one notable use case that I'll see. We also see in my world as well, because nowadays, the whole concept around cybersecurity is becoming a huge topic for all of us. Where you have people who are trying to either take down institutions, asking for ransom or whatever it is. So if you don't really have the type of capabilities that can detect anomalies within your information flow, for example, or within your system, then that would be very difficult to do. So I could also see another application area there in terms of maybe in cybersecurity, where real-time information perhaps could be very, very relevant. Of course, in e-commerce as well, we can see, and I used to work at eBay, in e-commerce, where we want to make personalized recommendations or personalized marketing to different customers. So when somebody is on site buying, so tracking their purchase behavior, their site activities can prompt you to really understand, what type of recommendations you want to give to them that perhaps might increase their purchase behavior in a way. So this maybe, for example, some use cases where I see the need for real-time analytics, and of course there is plenty in my world, because there is quite a lot of them. But just to name a few at least.
No, these are great examples, because it just demonstrates how ubiquitous it is, and we just don't realize it. We touch it every day, and those are great examples. Thank you for sharing that. I do have my phone sort of topic, a question to Prashanth. In your blog, you said that something caught my eye. You said half-life of a data is about 8 hours.
Yeah.
And so that intrigued me in terms of the number of hours and your focus on it. Can you please share more details on this specific?
Yeah, sure. In fact, it is not my research per se. It's I got this number from Nucleus Research, which has done this work on half-life of data. I took it further, and given that every company is different and every data is different, I did something called as my own weighted average, and then came up with about 8 to 9 hours, which is so. But that number which we have is basically what I'm telling my clients is that, there's no point. Even today, some of my clients are looking at data from 2012 and trying to derive insights. So I said, there's absolutely no point in deriving insights using the data from 2012 when you're in 2022. But at the same time, I understand that 8 hours might be a little bit ambitious, or kind of might be a little bit harsh on some companies. But what I tell my clients is, any insights that has been derived with more than, say, 2 years of data is practically doesn't have much relevance today. So what does this mean? the key word here is basically about keeping the latency very low. So what is the challenge which we have in the industry today is high latency in the way data is made available to the data scientists. So how we can reduce this delta so that we can derive quick insights. Like Michael was talking about fraud detection in the credit card industry. So and in the rail analytics industry, it could be more on the forecasting demand in the electricity grid, for example, utilities, for example, e-commerce purchases, like for example in Airbnb, for instance, or even the right promotions and price incentives in the retail world or the CPG world. All those things, the delta which you have is very, very little. So as Mike was talking about, we talk about bad decisions. So when we talk about bad decisions, we always think about wrong decisions. But even delayed decisions is also bad decisions. You might have the greatest insight in the world, but who cares about this insight if it is 2012? I don't care about this. What I need is insights which is 2022, or even better, something which is 2023 and 2024, so that I can be proactive and plan and respond and so on and so forth. So this is what I talk about, the latency associated with that half-life of data. So when Mike was talking about the different examples and different use cases, I'll tell a story about a client of mine, a VP of finance. He told me about the value of real-time analytics. He told me, Prashanth, we run our business every day, but I get my reports every quarter. So that sums up the value of real-time analytics. I'm not thinking that real-time analytics is like the next second you need to have this, all your margin reports, all your production reports and all those things. But basically what I'm trying to say here is that reduce the latency. How quickly can you reduce it? Can we move from months to days, but days to hours, hours to minutes, or if possible, even seconds? That's what the credit card industry, for example, the CPG industry wants. Very quick insights in a matter of seconds. That's what they're looking for.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So data latency is a big factor. So we're talking about it. Can I give us a little bit more under the hood, a little bit more about data latency from your perspective, Prashanth?
Yeah, sure. So when you talk about data latency, let's look at the data life cycle, for instance. So generally, in the world of data and analytics, I say there are 4 stages in the data life cycle. Data analytics life cycle. First is all about data management, which includes data origination and capture. Next, number 2, in almost any reasonably sized company, the data is not there in one system in one format. The data has to be brought in from multiple systems to one canonical system with one format, and that work is called as data engineering. And on top of it, data management typically happens for operations and compliance, whereas the world of data science is mostly hypothesis driven. So there's a lot of data massaging that needs to be done so that the data is made available to the AI world, to the data scientist, and so on to derive the insights. The third part of data analytics is data science, which is kind of simple, provided you have the right quality data in your data warehouse. If you have good quality data, running your regression model is nothing. Even a high school kid can do it, looking at p-value, f-value, and all those things, provided you have good quality data. But getting good quality data is a huge challenge in many companies. We'll not get into that discussion. And the fourth part of data analytics is decision science. You might have the greatest insights in the world, but if you're not able to transform those insights into decisions, then your data analytics programs are practically useless. You don't go very far. So basically, if you look at the data lifecycle, 4 stages: data management, data engineering, data science, and decision science. So now your other point, or the data latency, for instance. So most of the time, including my friend at the utilities company who said he's getting reports every quarter. So the challenge we have in the latency is bringing the data to the data warehouse, which I call it as the data latency. Next, number 2 is about the query latency. How quickly can we execute the query in the data warehouse so that we can derive those insights? So when I talk about latency, you can further break it down into 2 parts: making the data available, which is the data latency, And next, number 2, query latency, which is to execute queries blazing fast, like what you just said in your slide, blazing fast queries. That's what it is. How quickly can you execute those queries so that you can get good insights and use those insights to make better decisions and ultimately to improve performance management. In fact, there's one McKinsey article which I said is about the last mile of analytics, which is what really matters today to transform your insights to decisions and ultimately business results. And many companies are struggling in the last mile of analytics. Of course, they're struggling with the data latency as well, or data quality, but also the last mile of analytics is also an important factor which not many companies are talking about these days. Transforming insights into decisions. So we need to have good insights so that we bring the stakeholders together, whether we talk about ML, AI, and all those things, and get better business performance.
I think that's it. That's a good point. I think as you rightly mentioned, the last mile. I think this is something that many companies don't think about. And as I mentioned earlier on, I think this is really where the value itself is. You know, we hear some statistics that says 70 to 80% of this digital transformation does not work, or we don't get value out of our AI initiatives. The truth is that you can get a fantastic technology, you can collect all the data that you want, you can generate all the insights that you want. But if these insights are not really actionable, if not embedded within the decision-making process of those organizations, if nobody's acting on them, then it's super useless. It's not going to create magically some kind of value that you want. I think, for me, I think, rightly, Prashanth, as you said, I think there's a missing piece that not many organizations have really captured that part yet. I think this perhaps could be another webinar where you really delve into this type of things, so that people need to understand this. We talk about digital transformation a lot, but you have to digitize first. You have to get the capabilities developed, and then you forget transformation. You have to embed those insights within the organization. Otherwise, nothing works. So I think that's a great point that you just raised, Prashanth. I really like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Mike. Very, very good point, which kind of really leads us. And by the way, Mike, if you don't mind speaking a little more loudly in your microphones, some people are having a hard time.
No worries. Okay.
Yeah, no worries. No problem. So I think this brings us, it's a very good segue as we start talking about how do you apply and solve problems in the organization. The last topic that we had for today, before we take questions, if we have from the audience, is what are the solution capabilities that companies are realizing, really? And at the end of the day, when they do adopt a real-time analytics platform for their business, and maybe we can go same order, Prashanth maybe first, or either way, but Prashanth, if you want to jump in, that'd be great, and maybe Mike.
Okay, I'll go first. Fadi and Mike and others, like in my book, Analytics Best Practices, I think there is a few people who will get a door prize as well after this thing. But regardless, in the book, what I've discussed is 5 key building blocks which you need for data analytics solutions to succeed. The first thing, which I've discussed earlier, is the data culture, which is basically about measurement for performance improvement. So that's basically about the data culture and focusing on the customer, so on and so forth. That's number 1. Next, number 2, education, which is all about literacy. Number 2. Next, number 3, you need good quality data. And quality data is a big issue in almost every company where I have consulted. So many companies are struggling with getting good quality data. Number 3. Next, number 4 is tools. You need tools as well, because the technology is a very important factor if you want to scale up things, if you want to make things faster, better, cheaper, and so on and so forth. But technology is important. But before technology, you have to take care of your culture, literacy, quality data, and all those things. Technology comes later, not the first thing. And the last thing is about governance. So these are the 5 key building blocks that are, of course, there are many more. You can talk about it for days and days, but these are the 5 key building blocks that you need to get good data analytics solutions: culture, literacy, quality data, technology, and next, number 5 is about governance. And ultimately, in my view, when you talk about real-time analytics, yeah, StarRock has an amazing product about reducing the latency, both the query latency as well as the data latency. So that's an important thing that's required to bring this change. But the change is not just about technology. We are talking about systems, process, data, and of course the technology as well. So yeah. So this is what I will leave it to Mike. Mike has got some great insights as well. Yeah, over to you, Mike.
I think rightly, these are the key components as you just rightly mentioned. The data culture, the data literacy, the technology, the data quality, the data governance. I couldn't stress more on this data quality stuff, because this is also the part that many organizations don't think about. And you cannot really scale without having good quality data. And so that one for me, I think it's a given. But maybe if I zoom in a little bit more on the technology side, because as you said, with real-time analytics, the overall objective should be how we reduce the latency, or at least the response time in bringing the data either to the warehouse or at least to our frontline applications. So what I would say is that maybe some considerations in some of the components that people should think about, maybe not specifically or recommending specific technologies, because we have very good tools, as you mentioned, like we already have those tools that StarRock is providing already. But as a consideration, I would say maybe people should think about some key components like the protocols, data collection aspect, the processing unit, and maybe the storage and the data lake part. So different capabilities and different tools could be very useful in enabling your streaming system, your storage system, MetaStore, for example, and how you process the data. You talk about query latency, because this is also an interesting part or useful part, and also the visualization in a way. So maybe these are the things I will add to the great point that you just highlighted there.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Thank you, Mike. This was really the key topics we wanted to cover today. We do have one question that actually we've been monitoring any questions that are coming in. One question coming in. And whoever is on mute, please unmute yourself. And what steps can you take to build a strong data culture? And either one of you guys can.
Okay, I'll go first. Since I brought this issue of data culture. So I wrote a blog also on this, and Mike also contributed to that blog in Forbes about the data culture. So it's basically, when I talk about the data culture in the company, it's about three key elements. The first one is about measurement for performance improvement. So if you're not looking at improving your performance and measuring it using data, then the data culture doesn't exist. Like, for example, today, let's say that I go to the doctor and the doctor says, hey, Prashanth, your cholesterol levels are a little bit wacky, so you need to work on it. So I have two options. Either I look at the data, the report which I get from the physician, and I just throw it. I don't care about it. Or else I say, I'm going to take this data, which says that my cholesterol levels are a little bit off here, and I'm going to work on it. I'm going to do some stop eating pizza every weekend and all those things, do some exercises, meditation, and so on. So if I don't believe in the system of improving performance with measurement, I'm not going very far using the data which I have, which is the test report. The same thing applies to organizations as well. If you don't believe in that concept of performance improvement, then you might have the greatest insight, but that becomes just a performance insight in my view. That will not be actionable, which is what Mike was talking about a few minutes back. That's number one. Next, number two is focus on the customer. So you need to identify who are your customers who need those data or insights. So if you don't have a customer, for example, then again, you are not going very far. So you might say, hey, Prashanth, I am from HR. I don't have a customer. But when you talk to a customer, you don't have to think about somebody who's paying money for your products and services. It could be your employee, if you're an HR manager, who could be your customer, because he's coming to you for seeking help. So focus on the customer. And Mike was in his LinkedIn post just, I think, day before yesterday, he was talking about innovation and data and everything. If you look at the top 50 companies in the world, Boston Consulting Group's most innovative companies in the world, And if you look at them, the one common characteristics which they have is customer obsession. They are obsessed with customers. And by the way, Siemens is at number 11, I think, in that list.
So we need to climb up, we need to
yeah, you need to climb up. Yeah, but still, you're in the top 50. So number 2 is focus on the customer. If you're not focusing on your customer, then you're not going very far with your data and analytics. And the last one is focus on this kind of what I call it as consensus-based decision making. That means treat knowledge and insights as more important over title, seniority, designation, and all those things. They're all important. I'm not saying that. But along with that, give importance to data and knowledge and everything. Look at kind of the meritocratic organization. So I would say these 3 are the major characteristics. Like I have worked for GE and Apple and P&G, and I find this kind of cultural aspect even in these companies, and that's one reason why these companies are still there for decades and decades. Like if you look at P&G, I think they're there in the business for more than 100 years, for example. And I think that's these are the 3 characteristics which I can resonate with these companies as well. So there could be many more, but I think based on my experience, these 3 are the data culture characteristics to whoever has asked that question.
So, Mike, anything to? I agree. I agree to all the points that you've just raised. You have to. I think for me, what is the role of data within the organizations? How the senior executives, everybody within that perceive data in a way. So if data is not really central to everything that they are doing, and you mentioned your last point,
yeah,
I think you cannot really have a very successful data culture there, because it is this perception, it is the importance that you place on data, on the intelligence and knowledge that really will enable you to see, I need quality data. I really need to be able to scale this. I need to act on all of these different things. And so you're perfectly right.
Yeah, that's great to hear that perspective. Another question came by. Is it true that open source data analytic tools will prevail? Certainly from our perspective, and I'll turn it over to you guys as users and also experts in our field, is open source. We believe truly in open source. We've been very focused on that at StarRock. So and we think that's the only way to deliver innovation and quickly innovate at scale. So, but I'll turn it over to you guys and maybe get your perspective.
Mike, now do you want to go first? I'll come later.
No, definitely. I think there's always a place for open source applications, open source tools, and within your tech stack, not specifically to real-time analytics. But however, I think it also depends on the industry that you are working or that people are working. So I could see that maybe having commercial or proprietary tools, at least for me, it's also relevant or should be something that people should think about as well. Because when you have proprietary tools or commercial tools, at least the vendors have actually put a lot of thought in designing those things and taking into consideration all the different nuances that needs to be looked at. And of course, it's also managed and can be supported as well. So in as much as open source makes sense, it always contributes to your own tech stack. But nonetheless, I could also see that the need for those type of commercial applications or tools to be very useful or supportive in this venture as well.
So, Fadi, I just want to add to what Mike was saying and probably give some food for thought to the person who has asked that question. The short answer is yes. The future is going to be open source tool centric. But at the same time, the technology or the software is one part of it. Also, we are seeing today is about open data. So there's a lot of open data which companies are leveraging to get business results. Because if you look at the quality data issue which we have in the company, I was talking to a prospect and he says, "Hey, Prashanth, we need your help in getting 100% quality data." So I told him it doesn't exist. Oh my gosh. He said, "What are you talking about?" So your competitor, one of the big 4 consulting companies, has promised us that they are going to help us get 100% quality data. So I told him there is nothing called 100% quality data, because data is a recording of the past event. You always have to do a catch up of all those things that are happening. And with increasing mergers and acquisitions, divestitures, new product introduction, regulations, COVID, monkeypox, and all those things which are happening, the business is always in a state of flux. So it's nothing called 100% quality data which is there. So it's always a delta or less than 100% which you end up with. But how do you supplement that missing data which you have? And one of the things is about open data. Like I have a story as well here. Like I was working for an oil regulator in Canada. So I asked them, can I have the list of all the pipeline accidents that have happened in Canada? So they said, no, we can't give it to you. You are a contractor and it's very sensitive data. We can't give it to you. So I was just wondering, this question might, okay, I'm working in this field, but this might be relevant for many Canadians about pipeline accidents, because we have been discussing a lot about oil and all those things. So I just Googled it and I said, pipeline accidents. And I found that the government of Canada, as part of their open data initiative, has put all the pipeline accidents that have happened for decades in Canada into open data. So I just pulled it, about 2,000 accidents that have happened, right from $1 million barrels of crude oil spill to almost like 5 liters of crude oil spill. All the data is there. I just took it, put it into Tableau, and I made a visual, and I showed it to the person. So he actually got scared. He said, I stole it from somewhere. So he said, I didn't steal it from anywhere. I got it from open data. So many times, what I'm saying here is that many times you think that the data which you need is not there, but it is actually there. You need to be a little bit curious, start thinking critically, and all those things. So yeah, we can talk a lot about this, but we often talk about open source, but we don't talk much about open data. So some food for thought to the person who has asked that question as well.
I think that's a very, very good point. Thanks for sharing that. I really appreciate it. We do have an interesting question that just came up and it goes like this. So I'm going to read it carefully. In this age of disruptive innovation, where data technology stacks, frameworks, and tools are rapidly evolving, how can a company position itself to invest in these technologies and yet drive value for the business?
I think it's a very interesting question. So my perspective would be this: yes, the technology is really changing very rapidly. So companies, need to be aware of this and keep abreast of what is going on. Mm-hmm. So that is why I think my advice always is that don't make your architecture or your tech stack to be that rigid or kind of a monolithic kind of style of doing things like we used to do previously, and maybe try to adapt this kind of a modularized view of doing things, microservices, APIs, so things that can easily be moved around and adapted and changed with minimal effort as this technology change. Because if you have an on-premise systems and this kind of a monolithic so huge and big, adapting and changing, because any small changes that you need to do with any part of your system requires a gigantic effort to do about that. So my view is that one, you have to, it's something that we cannot avoid. The technology is evolving very rapidly. It's going to be changing. And what we have today, the things that we used to do before, many years ago, now, we don't do them anymore. Now we have, a very good technology that supports us with different things. So you have to keep abreast with that. So that one for me, it's a must. But however, as we are designing our tech stack, as we are designing our architecture, make sure that they are interoperable, make sure that they are very modular. Trying to break them down into different components where every component can be having their own data sources and easily adapted or updated as and when there is any change, for example. Now we can build cloud agnostic tools that can be deployed in the cloud, on premise, or kind of a hybrid situation. We don't need to be that rigid anymore. So for me, these are really consideration. You cannot escape the evolving technology, but make sure that you keep abreast with that, but ensure that at least your solution, your architecture at least is not that monolithic, that big enough that make it very difficult to change. consider adapting kind of modularity, microservices, kind of API kind of view that will enable you to adapt as and when there's any changes in the future.
Yeah. No, so great thoughts, Michael. To add to what Michael just said, one of the big enablers of innovation, in my view, these days, which I've been talking to a few clients, is to look at data products. I wrote a blog also on this, which is called the 5 C's of data products, which is collection, consumption. The third one is channels. The fourth one is compliance, and the fifth one is commercialization. The 5 C's of data products, which can help build innovation in the company. And it's not just my position. A lot of research has gone into it. Forrester, Gartner, McKinsey, BCG, all are talking about data products today. And I've also done 3 projects for some very kind of big companies, because in big companies the change is also kind of tough, which are also embarking on data products. So that's one aspect. The second aspect is focus on what Michael was talking earlier, is about quality data. So we have 2 parts of it to get value in the world of data analytics. One is data, other is engine, which is your tools. So garbage in is garbage out. So you might have the greatest frameworks, greatest architecture and everything when it comes to the engine. But if you are putting garbage into it, your output is again the garbage. So focus on data quality as well, which I've written a lot in many places, and I'll be publishing a book also on data quality in the next few months. So it's about quality data which is under your control. Focus on that, and of course you need technology as well. So you need both of them to come together, which is basically about 5 things if you are to look at getting innovation out of data and analytics.
Totally. Those are really good insights.
Yeah, great questions too. I love this question.
Yeah,
which are there.
Yeah. Very, very good questions. And we had quite a few of them come in. At this point, we don't have any additional questions. Mike and Prashanth, if you have any maybe closing comments before we wrap up the session.
Yeah, I think for me, my last comment will be that real-time analytics is something that the audience needs to consider. There are significant use cases where getting it right will add tremendous value to organizations. So I also understand the debate or the questions about is it the right time or is it real time? So whether it is the data or the insight needs to be available at the right time for decision making in that sense. So it is something that has to be part of your tech stack. It has to be part of the way you collect data, you process data, and then you operationalize data at least. So it has significant benefit as the phrase from Prashanth's blog, delayed decision is practically a bad decision. So be warned on that.
Now, what about you, Prashanth? Any parting thoughts?
And Prashanth, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. So Fadi, I see a question from Suku which says that how can one determine, how should one measure analytics against? So I will use that question as my last closing comments as well, which is a great question, by the way. Analytics at the highest level, I'm going to explain this like peeling an onion, for example. At the highest level, it has to improve business performance, including real-time analytics. Now, you might say, what is this business performance? I've heard this 100 times. What is it you're talking about? So it's basically 3 things. One is it has to improve your top line, revenue. Next, number 2, it has to reduce your expenses. And the third one, which many companies don't talk about, is reducing risk. So these are the 3 major goals the analytics program should be measured against. And those things, within those 3 things, it has to be on those factors which are under your influence and control. So let me give you an example. When you talk about what is it going to be measured against. So I was working for a refinery, and within that refinery, we had a team, a data science team, which was predicting the price of crude oil. So great, you are doing this. And they were using 200 different independent variables, including price of copper, weather, exchange rate, so on and so forth, to find out the price of the crude oil. So great. And there was a lot of discussion, noise in the team about all those things. And most of the times, the predictive analytics is always flawed, or the numbers are always flawed. Even there, they couldn't get it. That's number one. Next, number two, along with this team, which is a 8-member team, the banks are doing it, the analyst companies are doing it. So there are many other companies which are doing it as well. So now let's say that one of the factors which you do as part of your regression, you say the price of copper is going to be a significant factor in determining the price of crude oil. So what? Is it under your influence and control? Are you in the copper industry? What can you do about the prices? So there's very little you can do about it. So instead, look at those factors. To Suku's point, what has to be measured, which is factors under your influence and control. Focus on things such as net working capital, spend management, because you can do something about it rather than sitting in a corner of the world and doing the prediction about crude oil, for example, which nobody cares. And even if somebody cares, you can easily buy those predictions from all these banks and analyst companies. So at a high level, Suku, and again, the KPIs depends on company to company, but at the highest level, if I had to go, I'll go with business performance, which is those three things, and below that, fix those factors which are under your influence and control. And again, there is a fourth blog which I've written on this, which data to pick to measure your business performance, which is tied to the real-time analytics which we discussed. So you can go to Forbes and search for my name, and you will get that blog.
That's great. Thanks, Prashanth. Well, with that, we don't have any more questions come in. So I want to thank you, Mike and Prashanth, for the insights you unearthed for our audience today. And I want to thank the audience for joining us today. And we hope you found the discussion insightful, educational, and fun. And with that, I'd like to close the meeting by thanking you from StarRock for joining us as well. Please visit us on our LinkedIn page and follow us and engage with us. We'd love to hear from you and see how we can help you solve your real-time analytics problems. Thank you, everybody, and goodbye.